We're here today in the latest of our oral histories of German Village. We're here with Mike Rosen. Mike Rosen has spent more time on the German Village Commission than anyone else, I believe. Mike, you said 36 years.
Correct.
And we're going to hear a lot of tales about how the commission evolved and your role in it, and maybe some good anecdotal stuff too.
Okay.
Tell us first about how your background and how you got to the commission.
Okay, well, my background is in architecture, and I was really trained as a follow-up to somebody like a Frank Lloyd Wright. So I was a contemporary architect, not a traditionalist, a historical. So when I got appointed, it was all new to me and a real learning experience. And the more I got into it, the more I thought that we needed to save things in the Mohawk area near downtown. That was in the days of urban renewal, and that's what they wanted to do down here. And of course, Market Mohawk, they just wiped everything out. They didn't pay any attention to anything. They just took block after block and destroyed it. And that's when Frank Fetch said, no, you're not going to do it down here. This is too homey, and many of these families have been here for 100 years. So that was really the impetus, and the more I got into it, the more I appreciated what the historical structures mean to the community.
Tell us how you even found your way to the commission in the first place.
Well, as an architect, I was doing work for one of the members of the mayor's family that did daycare centers, and the city of Columbus was in a situation where they needed to change their building department administration. So I was offered that position, but I would rather make drawings than grade them, and so I said, no, I think I'll stay where I am. And I recommended somebody to the city, and they in turn hired that person. And then I got a later call saying that there was a need for architects on some of these new commissions. And so they asked me if I'd be interested in German Village, so I came down, took a little walk, and the next thing I knew, I was getting greetings from the mayor.
This was 1971?
Yes, fall of 71.
Did you have any previous experience with Mr. Fetch or anyone else in the village?
No. My experiences with Frank Fetch and Bill Schur were always very interesting.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. So, if 1971, you joined the commission. Can you tell us about...
I joined the commission. The makeup of the commission was such that there was a representative of the city attorney's office. There was a representative of the development department, and there needed to be one of the positions needed to be filled by an architect. Then it left about 4 at-large positions, and so I was appointed as the architect, and the meetings were held here in this building on the stairs and at the top of the stairs, and at the back behind there where the restrooms are now was the secretary's office, and there was a city budget for the commission, and her salary came out of that, and I was expected by the city or by her to come down about once a week and review the applications, make suggestions for the meeting at the commission, etc. And in those days, that was very interrupting. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, I'd have to run down here at lunchtime.
Right.
It interrupted my lunchtime. Sometimes people were upset, so I needed to see if I could calm things down. But there was no application form either, and so the volume just increased, and so I felt we needed a common form for everybody to fill out, and I felt that it should be a user-friendly form. So I created the form where I could suggest things very subtly so that the person filling it out could maybe see that they could check off something that might be more favorable by the commission than something else. So, and that worked for a number of years, and it was a forerunner to the guidelines, forerunners to application forms. What happened was that the secretary's budget here got cut because they created other commissions, Italian Village, Victorian Village. The city just couldn't afford that kind of administrative cost. So the move was to pull the administration downtown to the Department of Development. They created a historic preservation department and assigned an officer of that department to the village, and they moved everything up there.
Was that a few years after you joined the commission?
Yes, in my private practice, my secretary had a couple of small children, and she didn't want to work full-time anymore, so the monies had been cut back to a part-time, which is what the job should have been anyway. And so I offered her the position to come down here in the village, which worked out for her. And so that's when we were down on we moved from here down to Lozelle Alley. And so we were down there, and she worked down there until the city totally cut the budget back to the Department of Development. And eventually a gal by the name of Diane Cole handled the village, and very sharp lady. And of course there were a couple of gals that because things got moved downtown, society brought in a liaison person here, and there have been 2 or 3 great ladies. Of course, Jody Gratian was the last of the bunch, and so to speak, I think. I don't know whether there's somebody now or not.
Well, we're working on reinstituting.
But Jody was outstanding, and there was another gal, I think the first gal that the city had was a gal by the name of Susan Fisher, and Fisher's family has the Fisher's Nurseries down off of Parsons Avenue.
Let's go back to 1971. In these early meetings, you told me that both Mr. Schuer and Frank Fetch liked to let the commissioners know how they felt about projects.
Very definitely. There was also a fellow with another fellow with a German name who was with Ohio National Bank, and his name escapes me at the moment, but he was very much involved in these meetings as well. And of course they would come and influence the commission.
How would they do that? Or try?
Well, they'd walk around and point their finger at the drawing and say you can't do that, or they did different things.
Did that lead to some reforms?
Well, that of course led to the application forms, and when we moved down to Lozelle, we had a table up front and then rows of seats. So they couldn't come and get around us like they could previously.
Do you remember some of the folks you served with on the early commission, if you can remember any of them that tell us about any of them?
Well, there was a fellow by the name of Phillips, whose son sells real estate in the village.
Pat Phillips.
Yeah. Pat Phillips' father. I think he was the father was a retired fireman, and he was on the commission. And then there was a fellow from City Council, and but the names really escape me.
Tell us what some of the issues and philosophies were of the early commission that you. Now this is going back almost to the beginning, we're up close to the 50th anniversary of the
Right.
commission, and this is only 8 years after that.
Right. Well, there were no guidelines. We were doing what we could do, and of course, I knew enough about law to be dangerous. I had taken a business law course in college, and so I knew the historic basis of law was precedent. So we had to be very careful with how and what we approved. So I was cognizant of that, and of course later on, well, Dan Schettinger and then Scott Dewhurst were good attorneys to pretty much keep the commission on the straight and narrow, so to speak. But it was really, for me, it was a learning experience. I was not, as I said before, not historically trained, and this whole thing here was new. There were really no historical communities around. I think that there was Williamsburg, but that was a total reconstruction with donated monies, and God only knows if that's the way it looked in the beginning. And so, historic preservation was just around the country, was just on the cutting edge. And eventually on the commission, I can't remember exactly when, but a fellow by the name of Fred Hobbs was appointed to the commission. He was an architect from a firm called Tully and Hobbs. They used to do work for Lazarus and Gold Circle. And Fred, as a young person, got his early training working at Williamsburg. So it was just very interesting to work with him and see what he could pull out of his past.
One of the commissioners, Ann Lilly, that we spoke to, said she felt when she joined the commission, because it was early in the restoration of German Village, the commissioners tended to approve more projects then than they might now, just because they were trying to get redevelopment off the ground. Do you feel that way or not?
Well, we got more protective of the past than initially. Initially, if you wanted to paint or clean up, whatever else you wanted to do was wonderful. And then we got to the point that additions and renovations might change the character. And there were no national historic guidelines. And the national historic guidelines are a little bit different than what's done down here in German Village. The historic guidelines that National Historic Preservation pushes is that each project should be of its own era. And a prime example of that is the Louvre in Paris, where they put a very modern building on a 300 or 400-year-old building. Some of those are successful, but most of them are not. And it just, when you're in a tight community such as this, to give up the past detailing really turns against what's here. And so we kind of got to more of the additions needed to follow the proportions and shapes that were already here, because they're small structures on small lots.
Were those controversial issues for you?
At various times, they.
I believe they still are with the commission today.
Yeah. We had one. I would say the house on the east side of Frank Fetch Park. That was an issue several times. Another project that was an issue was Max and Irma's restaurant.
Tell us about that.
And a fellow that I had known previously, Barry Zacks, who bought that, and he also had the Claremont, called me down one day, and he and Todd Barnum were in the kitchen down there, and he said, I'm going to have the best hamburger in the country, and I want you to try it out. So that's what happened, and that had been after his initial visit to the commission, which everything was following. Well, as time went on and business grew, the restaurant needed to grow. So he was, I think, living in the house to the south, so he was thinking about expanding over there, and he was also thinking about expanding to the north. And right about that time, my regular work schedule took me to New York about twice a month, and I learned that at lunchtime it's kind of nice to get out rather than to be captive. So I'd walk around New York City a little bit, and I saw an awful lot of sidewalk restaurants. And so they came to the commission and they wanted to add on to the north of the building and put that solarium type space on there. And I just thought that was wonderful. But it was going to be on the public sidewalk. So the commission approved the concept. They went to the city engineer and they bought the land from the city, and that enabled them to expand the restaurant. Then they came back to the commission with the details. And the commission, at that point, in general, the attitude was different than it was when the commission passed the idea. And so I told my fellow commissioners, I said, we've already committed to this. We've got to follow through with it. And what's left for us is the detailing of it and the appearance. And I've been happy with what they did and was very successful. Had the details been turned down, it would have been a nasty situation.
I believe you were chairman of the commission as well, were you not?
22 years
22
of the
years?
36.
Okay, what years would those have been? Do you have a rough idea?
Well, when Dan Schettinger and I put our heads together, I became chairman, maybe about 73, 74. And I maybe a little bit before that, but then my wife and I got married in 79, and when I was up for reappointment, she said, you've got an awful lot of things on your plate. We're raising 6 kids now. And they're in different schools and lots of things going on. Maybe it's okay if you stay on the commission, but not as chairman. So I gave up the chairmanship. Ann Lilly was chairman for a while. There was a fellow, I think, there was a fellow by the name of Ken Redmond on the commission, and I can't remember whether he was chairman for a while or not. But there was obviously a few years where I was not chairman. And of course, in those days I was traveling a lot anyway, so it worked out just fine. And I learned a lot by not being chairman.
Tell us about that.
Because I was geared to organize the commission. And I created the application form. I wanted to create committees within the commission that would pre-review the plans, come to the meeting, and say, we met, we recommend this detail, this and this. We would move to approve the application as amended. And it would move on, and the meetings that would last from 4 to 11 could be cut down to maybe 4 to 8 o'clock.
Did you institute the business meeting the week before, which they still do today?
I can't remember how that came about, but that's what I wanted to do. And of course, in those years, I was practicing architecture in about 18 states, and I was appearing before other commissions. And it dawned on me that it isn't fair to the applicant to railroad through their application. That they've waited a month, maybe prepared for 3 or 4 months, they're entitled to have their day in court. So when Ann became chairman, that's what she did. I moved the meetings, tried to move them along pretty quickly. She let the meetings, let the people have their say no matter what. And so I learned a lot from that and from my being an applicant elsewhere, so that I then felt, maybe there's a happy medium somewhere.
So due process maybe helped at least assuage the feelings of the applicants, even if they lost.
Right.
I believe you indicated that you and Dan Schettinger had explored the idea of expanding the jurisdiction of the commission.
The original commission, when they set it up, they were afraid to include High Street, because in those days you still had merchants on High Street that had pretty strong feelings. And you still had some folks that were business owners in some of the larger homes on High Street. And German Village apparently just didn't fit in with those people's interests. So in order for Frank to get this thing through the city, he backed off and did the alley, Pearl Alley. And so when Dan and I were on the commission, and we took a look at the brewery district, and we saw where Lazarus's warehouse was, and that open land, it just looked to us that that could be space to do more contemporary stuff and create some public areas that weren't here in the village, that would enhance the village and create a neighborhood. But in those days, the society was very much concerned about real estate values. And so the people that were doing the development, other than the single family owners here in the village, they were afraid it was going to dilute their real estate values. So they were very much against it. So it didn't fly. And of course, later on, after Dan, we noticed that Nursery Lane and on the east side, that there were still several blocks that still were of interest and could be a part of the village. So I, with a couple other folks, tried to take the village over to Parsons Avenue, but we weren't successful with that. Now, in the long haul, it was probably good that it didn't go all the way to Parsons. There was a time when they wanted to put the Polaris Amphitheater over there in the backside of the brewery district, down there where the Kroger store is, and there was a tremendous outpouring of sentiment from the society, worried about what that would do to the neighborhood. And fortunately, it did go to Polaris, but had that been a part of the village, it wouldn't have even ever been an issue.
Over your time with the commission's makeup changed somewhat.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, initially the commission, as I said before, had members that had a member from council, a member or two from city government, and it was determined probably about the time the Ethics Commission came along with the state, that these folks couldn't voice an opinion or vote on something more than one time. And so the member of city council got removed, and the city employees got removed from the commission. So the makeup changed, and I think at that point there was no longer the requirement that there be a commission architect per se. However, as long as I was on the commission, I was the commission architect, and I felt that as the commission went along with the Ethics Commission and all of this, that we needed to have somebody with developing experience on the commission. We needed to have legal experience on the commission, and of course we needed village ownership on the commission. And of course, I've never owned any property in the village, never lived in the village, and so I was able to be very independent in the beginning when it was probably necessary. As time went along, became less necessary, but a city council person could not vote as a member of a commission, and then something that came for a rezoning to council, they couldn't vote on it a second time. So that really changed the makeup of the commission.
It's sometimes forgotten that both the German Village Society and the commission in their early days had a lot of folks involved from outside German Village.
Right.
And that has changed over time.
Right, right. And there was a lot of concern that the society was stepping on the commission's toes, and that the commission was being restrictive to the society. And as time went along and I saw things settle down, then I stayed away from the society because I felt important to be independent for a long, long time. I did join the society, I was a member probably the last 10 or 15 years of my commission.
Were the concerns of the society that the commission was being too restrictive or not restrictive enough? Or both?
Both. It depends on the case.
You were involved in the adoption of the guidelines.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, the society funded the guidelines, and a member of Schooley Caldwell architectural firm was retained to develop the guidelines. And one of the members on the commission at that time was a gal by the name of Judy Williams, who was very historically oriented, and she was very helpful. And so Schooley's office did an excellent job in the work that they did, and I'm sure that that was an entree for them for places like the State House and some of the other places. I did go, I was asked by a fellow that was going around Ohio helping different communities set up historic guidelines, and I did go down to either Circleville or Chillicothe and meet with those folks down there and tell them about German Village at his request.
Did the guidelines help the process?
Very much so.
And why was that?
Well, we could open the book and say, this detail and or its modification would work very well for your house. And this is in the book, this is historically what's here. And so it's been a big help.
As a commissioner, did you have a role in formulating the guidelines?
No, my role was in reviewing them and making recommendations. And I've also played a similar role in the city's guidelines for all the districts.
Well, and you mentioned you haven't just served on the German Village Commission. You've
Well,
been serving continuously in one commission or another
yeah,
since
about a
71.
year and a half after I left the German Village Commission, I was appointed to the Board of Commission Appeals, and I serve on that now.
And that handles appeals from all the
From-
commissions,
yes.
including German Village Commission.
Yes.
Tell us what service on that board
Well,
is like.
That turned out to be very interesting, and I guess I'll give you a little politics involved. These appointments to commissions, I did not know what I was getting into when I was appointed to German Village. I didn't know what I was getting into when I got appointed to the Board of Appeals. And it's a learning lesson. And I think that's true of any appointed or elected official anywhere, or an employee in an organization. You really don't know what you're getting into until you get there. And so the Board of Commission Appeals only deals with evidence that was introduced in the primary commission. And so, and then determines whether or not the commission made the right decision or not. And that's what it's based on. It follows the guidelines of an appeals court. And it's really more legal work than it is architectural.
And on occasion, you have to reverse the entity that you used to
Yes.
serve with.
Yes.
One of the things that occurred over your tenure, there were zoning fights over conversion to office and multifamily, were there not?
In what respect?
Well, I had that as a note from your earlier interview. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Well, what happened generally after the Second World War, and maybe even during the Second World War, but there were a lot of the larger homes in the village and elsewhere were converted to multifamily dwelling buildings by need of people that needed a place to live, and houses that were too big because 2 and 3 generations weren't living in the same house anymore. So, it was a societal change. And what had happened here in the village is most of these houses had not been converted. And so it just made a lot of sense to preserve them. And so the commission looked very carefully at those people that wanted to convert them. And of course, by then, the building codes have gotten more and more restrictive. And so between the building and zoning codes, it really became a hardship for people to take what was a duplex and maybe convert it into a 4-family because there was no parking, there were no way to get out of a basement bedroom, and so, we've dealt with those kinds of issues.
Can you recall any other controversial fights that got the public engaged during your time that would be interesting to recollect?
There were a few of them. Columbus Parks and Recreation wanted to do some stuff in Schiller Park, and they basically ignored the commission because they were part of city government. So they came to the commission, and we were able to work things out with them. They've got some wonderful people then and now, and so Schiller Park has been an asset to the village, no question. The school on South 3rd Street, school board was ignoring the commission too for a while, and we were able to convince them that there were a few things that might make the school look a little more like it should stay in German Village.
History repeats itself. They're still having issues with the Stewart School renovations.
I'm sure.
One of the things from your initial interview was discussion of paving of Third Street. Do you remember
Well,
anything about that?
Yeah, Third Street, the Dispatch had their paper warehouse over on Grant, and they would go up and down Third Street to get to their dispatch building with their rolls of newsprint. And they wanted the street blacktopped. And of course, the commission wanted to keep brick pavement in the village. It slows traffic down, it creates a nice noise, appearance-wise is community friendly, and so there was an issue about the paving of South Third Street, but it got worked out. There've been a few episodes in the village in order to save the brick streets, and people have gone out and helped the city stack up the bricks and whatever. When I did the design of the Livingston Avenue Methodist Church and the freeway was getting built, Mohawk Street extended up to the edge of the freeway. So I said to the contractor, I said, just pile the bricks up and we'll put a sign out there, and people that want bricks can come and get them. And of course, I took enough home for my own patio and built my own patio with those bricks, and a few people, I'm assuming, here in the village have built their patios with those bricks as well.
So the Livingston Methodist Church, Livingston Avenue, you designed that building.
Yes.
So very interesting. Quite a bit different from German Village type.
Right,
design.
right. There was an architect that was originally from Hungary and went to South America, and his son's an architect, and the father had to come from South America because living conditions got bad down there politically, and so he came here and he worked in our office, and of course he spoke German, Hungarian, Spanish. He spoke a number of languages, and so I can't remember whether it was the pulpit or the lectern, but on one face the prayers in English and on the other face it's in German, and he hand lettered that on the leather face, and that was quite interesting. He later became an architectural professor at University of Kentucky, I believe.
One other interesting issue that came up during your time was the Old World Bazaar.
Well, before my time on the commission, that was a car barn, and it had been converted into the Old World Bazaar. And then there was a fellow by the name of Carr, I think Bill Carr, and he bought the adjacent property as well as that, and he wanted to poke a hole through the wall and put a cocktail lounge at the back of that house, and that became a real issue. Fred Hobbs was on the commission at that point. I stood up because the applicant got belligerent and somebody had to grab hold of the applicant, otherwise I'd have been hit.
Well, you mentioned both Frank Fetch and Bill Schuer, who are really important people in the history of German Village. Tell us your recollections of them.
Well, Frank Fetch was buying properties around the village, and he bought the house over on Mohawk and rehabbed that. A good friend of mine, Al Berthold, has had ownership of that for a while. But that was interesting. I think the commission kind of gave Frank a little more leeway than they probably would have given somebody else on that particular house. Bill Schuer was the original developer on, I believe, I could be wrong, but I think he was the original developer on where Lindy's is. And he was quite active and quite concerned on what went on down here. And both of them, they were kind of like the neighborhood police.
Over your time, did you see the character of German Village change from what it had been?
Well, when I first went on the commission, I could buy a house for $3,900.
I've heard that figure a lot.
And my guess is before 2008, that same house would have been in excess of $500,000. Of course, it might have been through one or two renovations, but they became in demand, no question about it. And there have been some good work done down here. Andrea Camburn, who no longer lives in the village, bought and redeveloped several pieces of property. And my old buddy, Klaus Gower, who lived on the south side of the park, I don't know whether he's still in the village or not.
I believe he's moved back. We're going to interview him.
Okay, please do. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. But Klaus and I worked on an apartment project over in Centerville before and I attended his wedding, so which was before he moved to the village. So Klaus and I go way back.
Well, you've had quite a career, not just with German Village, but in architecture and with other commissions here in Columbus. But I'd like you to reflect a little bit on your service with the German Village Commission, what it's meant to you and what was important about it.
Well, as I said before, I didn't know what I was getting into. But it was, to me it was very homey, being able to participate. And if somebody had told me as an architectural student that I would be interested in these old buildings and historic preservation, I'd have probably laughed at them. But it's in my limited travels around the world, not around the world, but in several places, is that there's a lot to be learned from our heritage and the way people used to live, and not only in their own houses, but how they commingled in society. And this is just a very cohesive neighborhood. I live on the east side. Since I've been in Columbus, I've lived east. And I live in the Walnut Ridge area. And I moved into that area when I married my wife, and I was already a commission member. And we saw things starting to deteriorate somewhat a little while after busing started for the school kids. And there was a fellow out there that was an employee of the city, and he was kind of a go-getter. And so he decided to form a neighborhood association. And I said to my wife, I said, you know, that's the key in German Village. It's the people in the neighborhood participating, looking out for one another, picking up the trash in front of their house, so to speak. And so we've got a neighborhood association. We meet monthly, and the neighborhood is somewhat stabilizing as best it can through the economic times of people that are losing their homes.
So German Village has been something of a model for other areas of Greater
Very
Columbus.
definitely. You wouldn't have a Victorian village or a Italian village or even a university district probably if it weren't for German Village.
Mike, let me close the interview with this. What are you proudest of in your service with the commission?
Well, probably several things. In that, I saw the overall cohesiveness of the village, which I think the commission played a definite role. I think helping to create the guidelines, the application forms, user-friendly meetings. A lot of people in government forget who pays their salary, but on the commission I didn't have to worry about a salary. But we were here to help the neighborhood, not to make it more difficult for them. I've done work in some communities where you submit things and they say, this doesn't meet our requirements. Well, can you help me with what I might do to meet the requirements? Well, they say, go read the book. It's up to you to figure it out. And that's not the way we help one another.